The four horsemen of the apocalypse are the first four of the seven seals of Revelation, six of which are mentioned in Revelation 6. What do they represent? Now, before touching on that, go to Revelation 1, verse 10, please. It says, John says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Now, a lot of people somehow get that confused. I don't know how. It's not referring to a day of the week. It's referring to the day of the Lord, which is the day of God's wrath on the nations. It's not referring to Sunday. It's not referring to Saturday or the Sabbath. It has nothing to do with the day of the week. Zephaniah 1, verse 14 through 15. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord. The mighty man shall cry there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress. And it talks about it's a punishment from God. That's how the day of the Lord is described. If you go to Joel 1, verse 15. Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand, and as a destruction from the Almighty shall it come. If you go to Joel 2, listen to this, verse 11. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great, for he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? So who can abide it? Where do we see that type of language too? Revelation 6, verse 17. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Who shall be able to stand is the same as saying who shall be able to abide it. Let's compare the verses one more time. Joel 2, the end of verse 11. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? Revelation 6, 17. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? It's referring to the same time, which is the day of God's wrath. Still have any doubts? Go to Joel 2, verse 31. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come. Right before the day of the Lord, you're going to have the sun turning into darkness and the moon into blood. Where do we see that language? Revelation 6, verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And what did we learn from Joel? When you see that, it's right before the day of the Lord. So it's quite clear what Revelation 1, verse 10 is referring to. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day should be I was in the Spirit during the day of the Lord. He was seeing visions of the period right before and during the day of the Lord. Nobody could seriously doubt that. Having cleared that up, and remember too, the day of the Lord is different from the first six seals of Revelation. Those are, I'm going to contend this is what they are. The first seal is religious deception. The second seal, war. Third seal, famine. Fourth seal, pestilence. Fifth seal is martyrdom of saints. And the sixth seal is heavenly signs. That's not God's direct punishment on the nations. The day of the Lord is, and the seventh seal introduces the day of the Lord and punishments from God. That's when God starts punishing the wicked. All right, so that was a brief summary. Let's look at Revelation 6. And get Matthew 24 ready as well, because if you look at Matthew 24, Jesus seems to me explains what these seals mean. Revelation 6, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now, we know that when Jesus comes in Revelation 19, verse 11, he comes on a white horse. So some people may confuse that to being Jesus coming on his white horse. No, because what follows is not what's going to follow when Jesus comes. When Jesus comes, he's going to put down rebellion and institute the kingdom of God, the millennium for 1,000 years. He's not going to have happen what happens after the first seal. After the first seal, we see war, famine, and pestilence, and a martyrdom of saints. That's not going to happen after Jesus comes in Revelation 19:11 on a white horse. So getting back to Revelation 6 again. It says, verse 2, And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Compare to Matthew 24, verse 3. Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Pay attention, verse 4 and verse 5, I contend, match up with Revelation 6 there. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. So you see there religious deception, people claiming to be Christian, That matches up, I think, with Revelation 6, verses 1 through 2, the white horse, because that white horse can't refer to Jesus coming on a white horse. He comes later on in the picture. When he comes, you don't have the other 6 seals following. He comes and institutes his kingdom on earth. Now, back to Revelation, verse 3, when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. That's war. The second horse, the red horse, is war. What does Matthew 24 say? Continuing exactly where we left off. Verse 6 of Matthew 24. "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars." See how they match up? "See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." First part of verse 7. "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." Maybe Jesus said this because he wanted you to be able to interpret the 6 seals of Revelation 6. So we see in Revelation 6, we see the second seal, the red horse of war, in verses 3 through 4, matches up quite nicely with Matthew 24, verses 6 through 7. The first part of 7. Back to Revelation 6, verse 5. "And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine." Most people know that's referring to famine. And that makes sense. Famine could follow upon the heels of war. War many times results in famine. So you have, according to Revelation, a white horse, religious deception, followed by a red horse, which symbolizes war, followed by a black horse symbolizing famine. Let's go to Matthew 24. We've seen verses 4 through 5, religious deception. Verses 6 through the first part of verse 7, war. Now, continuing in verse 7, what's the next thing he says after, "and kingdom against kingdom"? He says, "and there shall be famines." So it matches up with Revelation 6. Incidentally, the next thing after famines in Matthew 24 says, "and pestilences." Do we see pestilences following famine in Revelation 6? Yes, we do. Go to Revelation 6. You start with verse 7. This is right after the famine part. "And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth." Many times beasts of the earth can kill by bringing disease and plagues and stuff. So we see in Revelation 6, excuse me, we see famine. Revelation 6, excuse me. Verses 7 through 8, we see pestilence following famine. The horse is a pale horse. It symbolizes pestilence and death. And that's exactly what happens in Matthew 24, verse 7. You see kingdom against kingdom, war. Continuing the verse, "there shall be famines," matches the 3rd seal. "And pestilences," matches the 4th seal. So is it a coincidence? I tend to think not. You have Revelation 6, you have the seals, false Messiah, false Christendom, false religion, false Christ, that's the 1st seal. Wars, the 2nd seal. Famine, the 3rd seal. Pestilence, the 4th seal. What does Matthew 24 have? It has false religion, followed by war, followed by famine, followed by pestilence. Seems a little coincidental, don't you think? All right, now back to Revelation 6. Starting with verse 9, the 5th seal, which is the martyrdom of the saints. "And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto them, unto every one of them. And it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be killed." So it's referring to a martyrdom of saints. Now back to Matthew 24. The last thing we read in verse 7 was you had nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, war, the 2nd seal. Then it said there shall be famines, the 3rd seal, and pestilences, the 4th seal. Now do we see the 5th seal shortly after that? Yes, go down to verse 9. Well, verse 8 says, "All these are the beginning of sorrows." Now, these are the beginning of sorrows, and clearly the white horse in Revelation 6, verses 1 through 2, cannot be Jesus returning on a white horse. Just to emphasize that again. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. Verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. There we see the martyrdom matches perfectly with Revelation 6. And then the final seal, which matches Revelation 6, verse 12, that matches Revelation with Matthew 24, Revelation 6, verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island removed out of their places. Those are heavenly signs. Now, do we see something similar in Matthew 24? Yes, if you go to Matthew 24, verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Matches perfectly. Read Bullinger in his companion Bible, which is excellent. Even he has a little mini chart showing that when comparing, once again, Matthew 24, verses 4 through 5 compares with Revelation 6, verses 1 through 2. The first seal, the white horse, is religious deception. And then you have Matthew 24, 6 through beginning of verse 7, matches with Revelation 6, verses 3 through 4. The second seal, the red horse, is war. And then you continue Matthew 24, verse 7, where it says, right after war, there shall be famines. That matches up nicely with Revelation 6, verses 5 through 6. The third seal, the black horse, famine. Then back to Matthew 24 again, I was reviewing this, verse 7, where it says, and pestilences following famine. We see the same thing in Revelation 6, verses 7 through 8. The fourth seal, the pale horse, symbolizes death or pestilence. And it makes sense. When you have religious deception, often leads to war. War definitely leads to famine. Famine definitely leads to pestilence. Then continuing in Matthew 24, verse 9, it refers to, they shall deliver you up to be afflicted and kill you. A martyrdom of saints matches perfectly with the fifth seal, the martyrdom, the fifth seal of Revelation. The sixth seal, the heavenly signs of Revelation 6, verses 12 through 14, that matches up with, if you go down a little bit to Matthew 24, same chapter, verse 29, talks about sun being darkened and the moon not giving her light, stars falling from heaven. And as we said, if you go to Joel, once again, when the sun is darkened and the moon turns to blood, that symbolizes that the day of the Lord is about to come. Let's go back to Joel 2:21. And we know this matches with Revelation 6, verse 12, and with Matthew 24, verse, 29, I think? We just showed that. Joel 2, verse 31, once again, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come. It's not referring to the Lord's day being a Sunday or a Sabbath. You have that happening right before the day of the Lord comes. And as we see, the sixth seal does mention sun become black as sackcloth of hair and the moon become as blood. So that clues us into what the seventh seal is. If you go to Revelation 8, the seventh seal, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of an hour. If you read those, the seventh seal is the seven trumpet plagues, which bring in the day of the Lord. Why do I say that? Zephaniah 1, I pointed out that the day of the Lord is punishment upon the nations from God. Once again, Zephaniah 1, verse 14. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hasteth greatly, even the voice of the day of the Lord. The mighty men shall cry there bitterly. Verse 15, that day is a day of wrath. And I don't have to read all those verses again. If you read Joel, the whole book of Joel is referring to the day of the Lord, which is Joel 1, verse 15, and as a destruction from the Almighty shall it come. So summarizing that, what we've discussed, the time setting is right before the day of the Lord, not a Sunday, not the Sabbath. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day is not referring to a day of the week. It's referring to God's punishment on the nations. He's finally had enough. And if you study the four horsemen, which are the first four of the seals in Revelation 6, white horse is deception, religious deception, a false Christ. That's not Jesus returning on the white horse. What follows is not what follows when he returns in Revelation 19. It doesn't follow at all. It's stupid to compare that. The second seal, war. The third seal, famine. The fourth seal, pestilence. And famine usually follows upon war, and pestilence many times follows famine. People are starving, they get sick and die. The fifth seal, the martyrdom of the saints, which another proof that Revelation 6, verse 1 through 2 cannot be Jesus returning on a white horse, because when he returns, there's going to be no more martyring of saints. That I could tell you. Then the sixth seal, the heavenly signs, that means Jesus is about to come back. The seventh seal, the seven trumpet plagues, that's inaugurating the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is God's punishment on the wicked. What we read earlier was Satan stirring things up, producing false religious deception and war. This is God directly punishing nations. So the seventh seal, there are your seals again. First seal, religious deception. Second seal, war. Third seal, famine. Fourth seal, pestilence and death. Those are the four horsemen. The fifth seal is the martyrdom of the saints. The sixth seal is the heavenly signs. The seventh seal is the seven trumpet plagues which institute the day of the Lord. And the seventh trumpet then brings in the seven last plagues and Christ comes. We want to be sure we understand this when it comes, because you're going to have the man of sin calling fire down from heaven. You don't want to be confused. You want to make sure, if you see anybody calling fire down from heaven, don't follow that. It's important to have a good understanding. And what does it say? Let me go to one verse here. Psalm 111, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all they that do his commandments. His praise endureth forever. So it's very important. If you want to understand this stuff, it's good to keep the commandments, all of them. And that kind of goes, just summing up in Revelation 12, verse 17. This isn't earning salvation. You keep the commandments out of love and out of desire not to sin. 1 John 3, verse 4 says sin is a transgression of the law. The Ten Commandments define what sin is, and we shouldn't sin. We're not earning salvation, but it's a code for Christian conduct. Revelation 12, verse 17, if you want to understand what's going to happen. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. Similarly said in Revelation 14, verse 12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. The commandments are not earning them their salvation. The faith of Jesus is. It's by grace. But they keep the commandments. And you will see that Revelation 22, verse 14. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they might have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Also, that they may have the right to understand what's going to happen. It's very important to understand this when it happens. When false miracles are done and fire's being called down from heaven and the masses are following it, we don't want to follow that. So I hope this is helpful. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.